In a courtroom in San Francisco this week, Google suffered what might be one of its worst defeats ever, if not its worst defeat ever, when it lost a major antitrust case brought by the creator of Fortnite that claimed that its Google stores, as used on Android phones, was a violation of antitrust laws. The jury took 3 hours, 4 hours at most of deliberation to find in favor of the plaintiff against Google on all 11 counts of antitrust violations. This comes as the Justice Department is headed toward trial or a verdict with Google over the much bigger case about whether Google's search engine and the way it uses this against competitors is a violation of antitrust law. There's all sorts of other procedures and court processes and government and regulatory agencies looking into Google on antitrust grounds. And it could very well be that this is a serious threat to Google. To talk about this case and its implications, we have called our good friend of the show and I think one of the leading experts on antitrust in Google, Matt Stoller, back to the show to help us understand all of this. Matt, good evening. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Always good to see you. Not always, sometimes good to see you. Tonight's good to see one of those. So let me ask you just about this case. First of all, go ahead and tell us what it is that we should know about this case where Google just lost in front of a jury on 11 counts of antitrust violations.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge deal, right? This is a multi-trillion-dollar corporation, almost like a private government, private almost kind of central.
You mean Google?
Organ for Google, yeah, sorry, in global, which multi-trillion-dollar big tech corporation are we talking about, right? It like controls what whenever we have a question, like Google controls the answers that we get. You can call it a global sense or whatever. It's very, very powerful. It's also one of several really powerful big tech firms. None of them have ever lost a major antitrust case. And now, for the first time, a jury in San Francisco, the heart of big tech country, said Google has violated the law. They are a lawbreaker. They are a monopolist. That is a huge deal. And as you mentioned, there's like a number of other cases that are saying Google's too powerful in these different ways. There's also cases against Amazon. There's some against Facebook. There will probably be some against Apple and maybe Microsoft. And so this is, I think, hopefully the beginning of a wave of allegations that these companies have been violating the law, and then kind of a restructuring of these companies so that we can actually have some control over our society again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this case, though, just to understand specifically what was alleged here and what the jury found. The case that the Justice Department has brought against Google that is now into this trial stage that you and I have talked about before on this show is one that really goes to the heart of Google's business, to its search engines, the way it disadvantages its competitors with its search engine dominance. This case wasn't about its search engines, but instead was about the dominance Google exercises through its Google Play Store on Android phones and its ability to charge fees and to use its ad business in conjunction with this Play Store. What specifically was the kind of antitrust violation the jury found Google had to have engaged in?
Yeah, so we either have in our phones an Apple phone or an Android Google phone, right? And these are supercomputers that are in all of our pockets, and they are basically digital leashes that track us, and we do a lot of commerce through them. And Google and Apple not only surveil us, they also they take a VIG, they take a piece of every time we transact and buy an app, right? So this claim was from Epic Games, which is they make video games. They make a number of software that goes into other video games. And they said, you know what? We are tired of having to go through the Google Play Store to get an app onto an Android phone. Because what Google does is they say, look, if you want to get an app onto an Android phone, you have to sell it through our app store. There's no technical reason for this. They just you have to sell through our app store and you have to use our payment system, basically their credit card processor. But unlike a normal payment credit card processor, which charges 2% or 1% or 3%, Google charges 30%. And so they're like, you have to go through the Google Play Store. So that's the only store for apps. And we're going to charge 30%. And Epic, a number of other companies sued, but Epic, the CEO was really mad. And he said, I'm not going to settle. And it went to a jury, and the jury said, yup, Google is monopolizing. They are forcing companies to use their, it's called a tying claim, but they are forcing companies that want to sell through their app store to use their payment system, and they're taking that 30%. And now it's going to go to a remedy phase where a judge is going to say, all right, you're breaking the law. you have to either maybe allow other companies to have app stores on the Android phone, or you can't force companies to use your payment system, or you have to spin off Android, like whatever it is. Like the judge could actually break them up if he wanted. It'll also likely be appealed, but it's a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. Like, there's appeals, there's the question of the remedy, but nonetheless,
Right.
I think, for Google to be in a courtroom and to actually go take a antitrust lawsuit to its conclusion and to lose in front of a jury, I would think has to be pretty rattling to them. On the other hand, there's this kind of
devastating.
yeah, but on the other hand, there's kind of cynicism that this handful of companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, are so gigantic. They're wealthier than a lot of countries. They're more powerful than a lot of countries. I think there's a lot of skepticism almost inherent that at the end of the day, they're just not going to be held accountable in a meaningful way just because they have too much power to allow that to happen. Do you see this as a real sign that Google is in trouble with all of these other cases that are now pending?
Oh yeah, they're done. I mean, it'll take 5 years, but look, there's 4 other major antitrust cases and that involve other parts of their business. There's likely going to be more than that. There are also significant cases about privacy violations, various ways that Google's been allegedly deceiving users. And the thing is that in each of these cases, it's going to be like a litigator, usually up in front of a judge who decides. Like, what was cool about this one is a jury. But now, like as well as I do, the judges are cowards, and they never like to break precedent, especially against a large company like Google. Well, now a jury's already done it, and in every case, the lawyers are going to be like, well, we know that Google's a lawbreaker already because that's what they were found, that they broke the law in this other case. So let's talk about their law breaking in this instance. And now all of a sudden, the precedent is such that these cowardly judges are going to have to find a reason to rule for Google instead of before when they had to find a reason to rule against Google. And I think it's going to flip all of these cases to be much harder for Google to win them. And I think ultimately, over the next 5 years, there are going to be appeals and stuff like that. But over the next 5 years or so, I suspect that Google's just going to start settling. They're going to start agreeing to split off pieces because they know they're going to lose. It's not worth it. There's lots of legal uncertainty. And I know there's a lot of cynicism, but this is actually how we restructure these companies. And it's actually sort of astonishing that it's working.
Yeah, we talked about before this kind of, I had Senator Mike Lee on my show last night. We were talking about the attempt by the Biden White House working with members of both parties to not only extend, but to expand the power of the FBI and the NSA to spy on Americans en masse without warrants. And we were discussing the fact that people hear that, they kind of know it's a bad thing, but it's a difficult task to get them to understand viscerally why it really matters to them, why it really affects their lives in a negative way. And I think that's the same as antitrust issues. And we've talked about before the reason why people should care. And I've told you this story that was really when I started working with Rumble, that I saw Google's ability to use its search engine dominance to just bury anybody they want that's a competitor to their other businesses like YouTube. It's impossible, and people in the audience should try and go do it. Think of a show that you remember we did and try and go to Google and find it by entering the title or the general topic with my name in Rumble and see if you can find this video. I have a hard time finding my own videos if I don't know the exact name as they appear on Rumble. And even then, the search engine will usually point me to the clip of it we post on YouTube, even though the viewership is 1/20th of what it gets on Rumble. And you can really see how Google, with this dominance that it has in the search engine, can just bury other companies, especially ones that compete with them in other areas. And so it makes this idea of competition a joke because of just how monopolistic they are. Is this a sign that these other companies that have also been labeled monopolies by the relevant committee of the U.S. Congress, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, also are in trouble in similar ways to the way Google is, in your view?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons is because this was not a government suit. One of the key distinctions between the way that the U.S. works and the way Europe works is in Europe, they have these big government agencies that do stuff for the public. Whereas in the U.S., you bring cases yourself, right? Like Rumble's bringing a case. or class action lawyers can do it, right? And you don't have to rely on the government or bureaucrats or politicians. You can bring a case yourself. And that's what's so exciting about this is Epic Games brought the case. These are very hard to win, or traditionally very hard to win, and they won. And now what I'm seeing is all of these like fancy law firms are actually, who always defended these big companies, they're starting to realize, oh, wait a second, maybe we can build a bigness going after these companies. And you're starting to see, you just saw today, a private company filed a suit against Amazon for targeting them in their retail store. And so like, I think you're going to see a ton of companies starting to file suits against big tech. And I mean, you know how like, you talk a lot about it's like Bill Ackman, and like one of the things that's going on in these is that like rich, powerful dudes, like they like to fight over annoying things in universities because it like gives them a thrill. And it's like, here you have the guy behind Epic is a guy named Tim Sweeney. And like what he did is the right thing that you should do if you're an angry billionaire that wants some sort of justice, is he took on Google, right? And that's the kind of thing that you hopefully will see. We'll see like people who really, who have some power in our society are actually going to start targeting the real oppressors that we're facing, which are like these big tech firms and other dominant firms, not just big tech, but across the economy.
I don't think you should be that dismissive of what Bill Ackman is doing, because I don't know if you know this or not, I don't know if you heard this part, but he said last week, quote, "I have been called brave for my tweets over the last few weeks. The same could be said for those who called out Joseph McCarthy during the Red Scare." So apparently there are a lot of people in Bill Ackman's immediate vicinity who are telling him, "Bill, you're an American billionaire and you're defending Israel. Do you know how risky and dangerous that is?" There's this long line of people who are billionaires who have supported Israel, who've been put into gulags or even killed, and yet you're going forth and doing it anyway. Just like the people who stood up to Joseph McCarthy, even though Bill Ackman is the one maintaining the blacklist and trying to weed out dissidents from universities. But anyway, I digress, because I just wanted to put in a word of defense for Bill Ackman, since you were so harsh about him.
I just tweaked you with Bill Ackman.
Yeah, exactly. You provoked me to go back to that tweet.
It's my fault. Can I say something about the FBI? Because I think this is something that's like pretty interesting.
Yes.
So one of the things about J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI that was good is that they actually did some stuff on antitrust. Like, people don't know this because it's not like written about, but the FBI was originally one of their charges, and they used to investigate antitrust. Since they turned to counterterrorism in 2005 or so, they've stopped doing basically any work on antitrust. So one of the things that might be kind of interesting to ask, and they don't want to kind of ask and note, is that, the FBI really has like white collar crime. One of the things that's actually bad about the FBI doing all sorts of this stupid stuff is that they're not actually going after white collar crime, collusion, raising your prices on food or medicine or controlling speech, or all these things that require deep investigation. And we have this like huge policing agency that's supposed to look at this stuff, but isn't. And I think that'd be kind of like an interesting thing to start sort of prodding people, is like, why isn't the FBI doing useful things like actually looking into corporate collusion? They used to do that. And instead they're doing like this kind of weird and annoying stuff that, I think we can all agree is at the kindest way to put it is that it's useless.
I think only Matt Stoller could find the good in J. Edgar Hoover based on antitrust activities. But let me follow up on that a little bit, because
that was probably the wrong way to say. Hey,
yeah, the weird segue, especially when talking to me. Hey, let me tell you one of the good things about J. Edgar Hoover. The thing is, though, Matt, I'm not exactly known as a fan of the Biden administration, but I do think one of the things he did that deserved a lot of praise, that I praised him for, is appointing as chair of the FTC, Lina Khan, who has a long history of doing something that a lot of people on the American right said they wanted done, which is confrontations with big tech over its sprawling, massive power. And I think there was at first, and we've talked about this before, some skepticism about a Democrat standing up to big tech, because there was an assumption that when Democrats stand up to big tech, it's because they demand more censorship power, which is more censorship. Oh, we demand you, Facebook and Google, censor more hate speech. But that's not what Lina Khan has been doing. She's been attempting to say these companies are way too powerful to be consistent with a healthy democracy. She's been confronting them in a lot of ways. She continued this suit against Google, or supported this suit against Google that was started by the Trump administration. This is the thing that the Trump administration talked a lot about, confronting big tech in a way that Lina Khan is doing, and yet you've had these incessant attacks on her. Here you have just today a new article from New York Magazine, which is a liberal magazine, and yet here's the headline: Lina Khan's rough year. When a liberal star took over the FTC, she was expected to break up big business. Instead, critics say she's broken the agency. Is this just the kind of influence that these big tech companies who hate her have, and it's manifesting in these kinds of articles, or is there something more substantive going on in why she's being so publicly vilified?
No, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, the guy who wrote that article used to work at Paul Weiss, which is a major big law firm, and, that represents, I don't know, Amazon and Facebook and so on and so forth. And the way he wrote that article, and this is consistent, like, this isn't a one-off. It happens, there's lots and lots of articles on how terrible Lina Khan is and her counterpart at the antitrust division, Jonathan Cantor. You could go on to CNBC. You can see, like, just anywhere where, like, big money is talking, they just, like, despise these people. And what this guy did is he talked to he's like, I did interviews with a bunch of people who have left the agency and they don't like her. And it's like, well, of course they don't like her. Like, she changed things so that the agency would take on big tech and take on, big pharma and various companies like that. And they're mad because, like I said, and they left and now they work for big tech and big pharma and so on and so forth. And what's crazy about this situation is, like, the author of that article said, look, Lina Khan, because, some people don't like her, might jeopardize the ability to revolutionize antitrust. And that article came out literally 5 a.m. the day after Google lost its first antitrust case. And that's what New York Magazine actually thought was interesting and what they thought that people should know about antitrust and anti-monopoly. In addition to that, and this is something people didn't notice because the Google case overshadowed it, but the FTC yesterday, like the day before this case came out, sued a pharmaceutical company that charges for a rare disease called the Pompe disease. They charge $750,000 a year for treatment, and they were trying to buy what was a potential rival. And Lina Khan's FTC blocked that, said you can't do that, and then they walked away from the deal. So we'll probably bring competition and reduce the price eventually. And she's very successful. I mean, nobody thinks that these companies should be able to charge $750,000 a year for these kinds of treatments. And every biotech venture capitalist and biotech person on Wall Street was just fuming at the mouth. Like, how dare someone come in and say, you can't block, no one should be able to block us from financing companies who are going to charge $750,000 a year or $1 million a year for a treatment for a rare disease. How dare someone do that? And that's, like, happening across a lot of different industries, these egregious cheating and corrupt practices happening in corporate America. Finally, a few people in certain factions of the Biden administration are doing something about it. And there's some holdover from the Trump administration. It's not a partisan thing. And the fury from the big law people. Oh, the guy, by the way, who wrote this is a Democrat. So just like it's an intra-party dispute. And you see similar fury on the Republican side with Republicans who want to do something about concentrated power. And then, Republican big law people who are, angry about it. Like a couple of, months ago, George P. Bush had an article in the Wall Street Journal being like, I'm really mad at, the Republicans for supporting antitrust. And so
George P. Bush.
George P. Bush, I know. I love, it was hilarious. But that's what you
Yeah,
feel,
no, I mean,
right?
this is if you're going to take on big business and big tech and corporate America and stand up for the consumer, which are the people who pay the prices for these unscrupulous practices, you're going to end up as the subject of hit pieces in the kinds of magazines that listen to those powerful factions. That's really almost a prerequisite to be able to prove that you're actually doing your job. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.